While most companies faced massive losses during the pandemic, one brand saw a 25% surge in sales: Jo-Ann Fabric. By the end of 2021, they posted an unheard-of profit increase of over 50%, hitting an all-time valuation of $2.7 billion. But just 3 years later, Jo-Ann was buried under $2.44 billion in debt, filing for bankruptcy and closing over 850 stores nationwide. How did this 82-year-old retail giant go from unprecedented success to collapse so fast? What really fueled their pandemic boom? And what caused their downfall? This is the story of Jo-Ann Fabric's stunning rise and fall. It was March 2019 when Wade Miquelon stepped in as the new CEO of Jo-Ann. To most, it seemed like just another leadership change. But under the surface, something was breaking quietly, and there were signs. But Jo-Ann was not always like this. This company, a crafting giant with over 850 locations across the US during its peak time, had humble beginnings. In 1943, 3 German immigrant couples decided to open a small shop in Cleveland, Ohio, together. The Cleveland Fabric Shop wasn't born from ambition. It was born from necessity. During the war, sewing wasn't a hobby, it was survival. People couldn't afford to replace clothes, so they mended them. And Jo-Ann bridged that gap, offering affordable fabrics when families had little else. The store's mission wasn't about trends, it was about helping people during wartime. So, by 1948, a second location opened. And as the demand spread, 16 more outlets came. In 1968, they rebranded the chain as Jo-Ann Fabrics. It was a name created by combining the daughters' names from the founding families, Joan and Jacqueline Ann. That same year, the company rebranded its parent corporation again as Fabry Centers of America and went public. It was a signal. They weren't just a local store anymore. They were aiming for the nation. Through the 70s and 80s, Jo-Ann Fabrics became a household name. The stores were huge, packed with yarn, needles, patterns, and beads, everything a creator could want, and the company just kept growing. For example, in 1990, Jo-Ann opened a 1.2 million square foot distribution center in Hudson, Ohio. After 4 years, the company acquired Cloth World, a southern chain with 342 stores, adding to the 655 already operated by Fabry Centers. Then another major acquisition followed in 1998, House of Fabrics, including Fabric King and Sofro Fabrics. That September, the entire chain was unified under one name, Jo-Ann Stores Incorporated. But behind the success, cracks had already formed. Back in 1992, they had exaggerated their profits to investors just before selling their stocks. As a result, in 1997, they had to pay $3.3 million to settle federal charges after being accused of misleading investors. This dispute was kept secret. Only a few shoppers ever knew about. But it showed something critical. Jo-Ann's fabric of integrity had been stretched. Then came the shift in tone, almost after a decade. In 2006, Daryl Webb took over as chairman and CEO. But the business of Jo-Ann Stores was slowing down and facing tough competition. On the other hand, some new owners promised to improve the store and make it more successful using a new strategy. And this new owner was nothing but a private equity firm, Leonard Green and Partners. 4 years later, Webb sold Jo-Ann Stores to them for $1.6 billion. We will talk more about this point later. For now, just know that Jo-Ann was delisted from the stock exchange in 2011, and Webb soon resigned. In 2015, Jill Soltau took over. Under her leadership, Jo-Ann pushed back against President Trump's tariffs. She argued that American manufacturers couldn't match the quality or volume that the company needed. 2/3 of Jo-Ann's products came from China, so finding replacements wasn't just hard, it was nearly impossible. Soltau joined 7 other retail CEOs in a meeting with the administration. They weren't just fighting for their bottom lines. They were fighting to keep prices down for the millions of hobbyists who relied on Jo-Ann for their creative outlets. While its final outcome was yet to be revealed, in March 2018, Jo-Ann also dropped fabrics from its name and removed the hyphen. It was another strategic move. A rebrand meant to tell the world, Joann isn't just about fabric anymore. It followed a trend. Dunkin' Donuts became Dunkin'. Starbucks coffee became Starbucks, and Weight Watchers became WW. The message was clear. Broaden the appeal, shed the baggage. But in business, there's a simple rule of thumb. If you try to be everything, you might risk becoming nothing. And Joann was exactly on that path. Meanwhile, Soltau already saw the outcome of their protest against tariff plans as well. Despite their efforts, the tariffs remained in place, forcing Joann to raise prices and rethink its supply chain strategy. So that same month, Jill Soltau left the company to pursue a different career. And by March 2019, Wade Miquelon stepped in. His mission was clear: stabilize, cut costs, fix operations, make Joann profitable again that aligns with the current tariff plans. But when a company has spent years building a deep connection with its customers, you can't fix the damage just by changing the logo or showing numbers. You have to listen, you have to feel, and you have to see what's unraveling. Because by that point, signs of struggle were all over the place, and some had already begun to understand. The shelves were bare, the aisles were quiet, and behind the counter, one employee tried to juggle it all, answering phones, restocking yarn, and ringing up frustrated customers. This was Joann Fabrics in early 2024. A craft store that once buzzed with color and community now felt abandoned. Then came the gut punch. March 15th, 2024. Joann suddenly filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. $2.44 billion in debt. Just days earlier, they were still taking orders online, still offering coupons, still pretending everything was fine. But behind the scenes? The seams were unraveling fast. By that point, Joann was barely holding it together. Their stock price had collapsed to just 50 cents, down from $2.15 in May 2023. It was a heartbreaking fall from its 2021 peak of $16.93. But why so? Sales were down. Bills weren't getting paid on time. Analysts were circling like vultures, placing Joann at the top of the most likely to go bankrupt list. To the outside world, it looked like poor luck. But inside, employees whispered another story. One of vanishing leadership, cost-cutting, and decisions made far from the cutting table. After the CEO stepped down, Joann was steered not by a single leader, but by a committee. Yes, a literal office of the CEO. Imagine being on a sinking ship and no one's holding the wheel. That was Joann. And then there was the press release, the one that announced their bankruptcy. It had a playful banner with scissors, thread, and soft pastel colors, like those gentle shades could ease the worry of 18,000 employees facing an uncertain future. But Joann wasn't closing, not yet. The bankruptcy was filed under Chapter 11, not Chapter 7. Let me tell you the difference between them. Chapter 11 is like hitting a pause button to rearrange the puzzle pieces. The company keeps running while it tries to fix its mess. Think of it as a messy garage. You're not demolishing the house. You're just trying to reorganize the chaos before everything collapses. As part of that effort, Joann struck a deal, a Transaction Support Agreement, or TSA. It's basically a financial truce with their lenders. In return of this truce, they'd get $132 million in fresh funding and chop down over $500 million in debt. They'd keep stores open, keep employees working, and try to sew together something that looked like stability. So that was the plan. But then came another red flag, their court hearing. It was scheduled for April 17th, but it eventually got canceled without any explanation. So, at this point, everything was in a hanging situation. Because behind all the business jargon and press releases, there are real people. Store managers clocking 12-hour shifts, customers wondering why their fabric order hasn't shipped in weeks, and employees who once believed in the brand that built their careers. And now, they're all waiting for an answer. What happens next might depend on what Joann isn't telling us, and we'll see just how deep this crisis really goes. And for that, we need to look at Joanne in its pandemic era. It was supposed to be Joanne's moment of triumph. 15 million new customers. A nation rediscovering handmade comfort in a world turned upside down. At the height of the pandemic, Joanne Fabrics was no longer just a craft store. It was a lifeline. A place where anxious hands could find purpose, where a sewing machine became a symbol of survival. For a moment, it looked like Joanne had stitched itself a new future. But what if I told you that, right at that moment, just when things were looking up, they were already falling apart? Joanne had made a deal that looked brilliant on paper, but in hindsight, it was like gluing glitter to a cracked foundation. Remember, we already told you that, back in 2010, Joanne was bought for $1.6 billion by Leonard Green and Partners? This was a private equity firm with a polished smile and $9 billion in its pocket. Now, what does this private equity firm mean? I'll tell you. Private equity is when investors buy a company. They usually pick companies that are struggling or undervalued, like Joanne. Then they try to make the company better. How? But cutting costs or changing the leadership. Plus, they work to grow the company's value. After a few years, they sell the company for a profit. So for any company, private equity is kind of bad news. Because as you can see, these firms are like house flippers. But instead of kitchens and bathrooms, they gut leadership teams and cut costs like drywall. To them, Joanne wasn't a hub for makers. It was an undervalued asset, a store to patch up and sell for profit. So, first came the rebrand. Then, the revolving door of executives. The CEO left, and for a full year, Joanne didn't have a captain to take its helm, as we said just a while ago. Inside the boardrooms, strategic decisions were made, fueled by spreadsheets and shareholder promises. But outside, in the aisles full of thread, beads, and glue sticks, something precious was already missing. Joanne's trademark stuff that the brand was known for. You see, crafting isn't just a hobby. It's deeply personal. People who knit or sew or scrapbook don't just shop. They bond. They trust. And when you break that trust, when you treat loyal crafters like faceless consumers, they leave quietly one by one. Exactly that's what started happening with Joanne. But you might say, even during the pandemic, there was a massive wave of new customers. True, but it was a false high. People flooded into Joanne's stores and online carts when the world shut down. But it wasn't loyalty. It was survival, and mostly randomness. And when the masks were sewn and the world reopened, many of them vanished. Because Joanne hadn't given them a reason to stay. Meanwhile, employees, the ones who kept the shelves stocked during lockdowns, were overworked and underpaid. The company had found a way to grow revenue without growing wages. And that cost-cutting mentality came at a cost that no spreadsheet could calculate: trust. Because here's the thing, no one in that boardroom seemed to understand. Crafters are loyal, but they're also proud. They know their worth, and they expect the same from the brands they support. Then how come all the experienced and learned business analysts could not understand this truth? Because they only focused on their shares of profit, and whatever they did, it looked like a win. But was it long-term or short-term? They didn't look. For the time being, stores were packed like Black Friday. Lines were snaking down aisles. Looked like Joanne Fabrics had tapped into something powerful during the pandemic. A flow of customers, all desperate for fabric to sew masks, make crafts, or just keep their hands busy in lockdown. But what looked like a comeback was actually the start of collapse. And to understand this properly, we need to take a look at what the former employees said. They paint a completely different picture. Staff were being asked to do the work of 3 people for the pay of 1. Some stores had just 2 workers running the entire operation at once, ringing up customers, cutting fabric, and fulfilling online orders simultaneously. It wasn't a workplace. It was a pressure cooker. One manager in Washington called weekends total chaos, comparing it to Black Friday, with no time to even wipe down surfaces. Employees came to work while visibly sick because part-timers had little to no sick leave. One cashier told Vice, "I don't believe we're an essential business." But Joanne overlooked all of these and kept insisting otherwise. Finally, when COVID hit, other businesses shut their doors. Joanne fought to stay open. They claimed their free mask kits made them essential, helping hospitals. But employees? They weren't so sure. One worker even revealed those kits were often just scraps from the clearance bin. As a result, in Michigan, the government disagreed with Joanne's self-assessment. The governor's stay-at-home order forced closures. Joanne tried to fight back even there, but lost. The Attorney General made it clear. They weren't critical infrastructure. In McHenry, Illinois, police issued cease and desist letters to local Joanne stores that refused to close. Clearly, it was a stunning fall from grace that washes away the brand credibility. Meanwhile, the company's response to the crisis was unbelievable. They had only one mantra: cut corners, cut hours, cut benefits. Former staff say that just before their first bankruptcy, Joanne demoted full-time workers to part-time, stripping their health insurance. Then they canceled promised hazard pay on Christmas Day. One worker summed it up with brutal clarity. They threw their employees under the bus day one. By doing all these, Joanne's board thought they had found the key to endless growth. But their math never factored in the people doing the actual work. They plugged customers into spreadsheets, not realizing that behind every transaction was a human being, overworked, underpaid, and running on fumes. And they're not alone. In 2023, retail giants like Bed Bath & Beyond, Tuesday Morning, and Party City all declared bankruptcy. Some were hit hard by the pandemic. Others, like Party City, were already struggling from things like a helium shortage. But Joanne's story, it was different. Because as you can see, the warning signs were everywhere. They just didn't listen. The question is, how long could they keep pretending and refusing to listen? Because what happened next forced even their most loyal supporters to look twice. Suddenly, Joanne Fabric hung the red 40% off signs everywhere. It was bold, massive, and extremely flashy. But what was the purpose of it? And how could a struggling brand like Joanne give 40% off on each purchase? A TikTok user stood in Joanne Fabrics during a closing sale, holding a bolt of $12.99 fabric. She did the math. 40% off, then another 50%. So a $12.99 product should cost $3.89, right? But when she reached the counter, the price didn't go below $7.49. Clearly, something didn't add up. Had the price been hiked before it was slashed? The answer, yes. And it wasn't an isolated incident. Across craft forums, what used to be a trusted brand had become a matter of trolling. Everyone laughed bitterly. It's always 40% off, except when it's not. Customers weren't just disappointed. They felt misled. One angry shopper filed a complaint with the Better Business Bureau, calling Joanne's coupon policy false advertising. She explained how the store promoted 25% off sale items, only to be told at checkout that it didn't apply to clearance. That kind of small betrayal stung, not because of the money, but because of the manipulation. People began posting receipts, comparing past purchases. What they found insanely disturbing: coupons weren't lowering prices. They were erasing artificial hikes. One user uploaded a sign where Joanne marked an item up just before applying the discount. The numbers told a cruel truth. People were being fooled in the name of trust. Now just imagine how much it can affect a company. And as shoppers turned bitter, the internet turned brutal. Memes mocked the brand. Videos dissected its tactics. Joanne had tried to outsmart its customers, but it had only outsmarted itself. Then came the second blow. As physical stores struggled, the digital world surged. Competitors were building sleek websites and direct-to-consumer portals. Meanwhile, Joanne had fumbled its biggest opportunity. Even after surviving the 2008 recession, which wiped out Linen and Things, they never built a usable website. It was clunky, outdated, a ghost of retail past trying to operate in a world that had moved on. As a result, Joanne had a front row seat to this collapse. They could modernize the branding, but they didn't. Instead, they kept throwing coupons at a fire that needed something else entirely. Trust, relevance, vision. Naturally, when the next blow came, it just broke Joanne's backbone completely. Joann's was in big trouble as the digital era was just starting. Compared to their competitors, Michael's and Hobby Lobby, Joann's was struggling. Their stores were not managed well. Their prices were higher. Shipping was slow and frustrating. Many customers chose Walmart or online shops instead. It was easier and cheaper. Joann's looked a lot like Hancock Fabrics before it closed. Maybe Joann's could not survive the changes in shopping habits. I got a question for you. You have Amazon now for everything. Would you still go to buy from Joann? Put your answer in the comment box below. If no is your answer, you are definitely a part of the majority. Good that Joann also understood that, and in 2021, Joann finally tried something new. They went public and raised $131 million. It was a smart move. It gave hope for a fresh start. But by fall 2023, things were worse. They had to lay off workers at their main office in Ohio. Then, their stock price fell below $1. And that's an extremely bad sign for a company. Because when this happens, chances are that company won't be allowed to go public anymore. And literally, soon after, NASDAQ sent a delisting notice to Joann. On March 18, 2024, Joann had no other choice except to file for bankruptcy for the first time. They wanted to fix their money problems. They hoped to cut over $500 million in debt. They planned to become a private company again. But it did not work. Less than a year later, in January 2025, Joann's filed for bankruptcy again. Now their debt was $615 million. Even after cutting $55 million last year, the debt grew. But what was the reason? According to Joann, sales were dropping. They also had shortages of products. Plus, inflation and supply chain problems made things worse. The Wool's kits once sold at Joann's were being pulled out. This hurt many people who relied on the store. The problem spread like falling dominoes. Experts noticed customers were moving to Michael's and Hobby Lobby. Some people hate going to Hobby Lobby though, but now it was their only choice. The saddest part is that whenever a big brand falls, it's not the board members who suffer the most. It's always those who you can't think of in the first attempt. Who does the bankruptcy affect the most? When a company breaks, who really pays the price? Definitely not the big private equity firm that owned Joann. They had many businesses. One falters, the others stay afloat. It wasn't the board of directors steering from a distance. And surprisingly, it wasn't even the top executives in the shiny corner offices either. In fact, those same executives were handed hefty bonuses just to stick around for 6 more months. Chris, Scott, and Robert, together set to collect over $1 million. Bonuses just for staying put while the company was falling sharply. But the fallout? It was landing hard on the people in the stores. The ones stocking the shelves, the ones ringing you up, the ones cutting fabric behind the counter. In a small Joann store in Florida, Sam, a part-time worker and full-time student, was living that reality. When the company announced restructuring, the choice was brutal. Take a $22,000 severance and walk away, or accept fewer hours and a pay cut. Almost all the full-timers chose to leave. Only Sam stayed. Even he was suddenly promoted to key holder, juggling closing the store for $13.10 an hour. When the time of Thanksgiving came, it was a nightmare. Sam asked for 4 days off. The company gave 2 back-to-back 11-hour shifts on Black Friday and Saturday instead. Sam felt trapped. If they quit, the store might collapse. Meanwhile, some new hires also flooded in. But with so many experienced workers gone, mistakes piled up. Fabric cut wrong, fake bills accepted at the register. Imagine a store the size of a grocery store run by only 3 people. One at the fabric counter, one at the register, and Sam running everywhere else. Efficiency vanished. Safety vanished too. Working late nights with such a few staff wasn't just hard, it was dangerous. Then came the wave of online orders. Joann's stores themselves had to pack and ship thousands of packages. Between Black Friday and Christmas, Sam's store packed up to 200 orders a day, but the system's number never budged. 2,000 orders hanging like a shadow for a whole week. The store pushed employees with promises of more hours if they packed faster. But the supply of packing materials ran dry, and orders were late or messed up. Sam never wanted to leave, mostly because of the co-workers who have become like family. But they dreamed of change. More staff, stable full-time jobs, reasonable hours, and an end to the endless push for growth that came after the pandemic boom. These workers live in uncertainty every day. They stay not just because they need money, but because they care, because they believe Joann can be better. But how did Joann respond to that belief? In 2024, during their first bankruptcy, Joann made a bold announcement. They said they would come out of bankruptcy soon, but not just barely surviving. They promised to come back as a private company. This caught many off guard. It sounded like a fresh start, but few knew what was really coming. And surprisingly, they did it as well. Joann cut their massive $1 billion debt down to $500 million. But here's the part that shocked many. They managed this huge change without laying off a single employee or closing any stores after filing for bankruptcy. Jobs were kept safe. Stores stayed open. It felt like a small miracle in a tough time. On April 25th, 2024, a federal judge even approved Joann's plan to reorganize. This wasn't just legal paperwork. It was the green light for the company to officially leave bankruptcy. They also became a private company and seemed like things were finally turning around. But the real question was, how did they pull this off? What happened behind closed doors? Was another storm just brewing? And the answer came out faster than anyone could think of. Less than a year after coming out of bankruptcy, it filed for Chapter 11 on January 15, 2025. Sales were dropping again. The shelves were empty because there was not enough stock. The retail world was tough, and Joann was struggling to keep up. Michael Pendergrass, the temporary boss, said the company was looking for a buyer, someone who could help save the business. So far, only one company, Gordon Brothers, wanted to buy Joann, but only to close it down. They planned to sell everything in going out of business sales at all Joann stores. But Joann hoped for another buyer who could keep the stores open. If no one else came, Gordon Brothers would sell off $38.3 million worth of clothes and things in the stores. Joann started this bankruptcy with $15.7 million in debt, even after cutting $55 million in 2024. Last year, Joann made $2 billion in sales, but that wasn't enough to fix everything. Joann had over 850 stores in 49 states. Almost 19,000 people worked there. Each person had a life depending on the company. Even though the company cut its debt last year, many problems remained. Prices were rising, competition was fierce, supply chains were broken, so new stock was hard to get. Plus, Joann still owed suppliers $133 million and paid $26 million in rent every month. That made things even harder. So, the future of Joann and thousands of jobs is hanging by a thread. What would happen next? Currently, Joann owes a huge amount of money. More than $450 million to banks and $133 million to people who supply goods. It's like they are buried under a giant pile of bills they can't pay. Many small businesses are waiting for money from Joann. Some are still owed thousands of dollars. They don't know when or if they will get paid. This money means a lot to them. It's how they pay their workers and keep their shops open. Joann needs to sell itself or parts of the company to pay these debts. But they can't just sell right away. They need permission from the court first. If the court says yes, they must hold an auction within 30 days. If they don't hold the auction on time, they could lose money that is held as a safety by the lenders, money that could save the company. If no one makes a better offer there by February 12th, Joann will probably sell to Gordon Brothers. That would mean many Joann stores might close and many people could lose their jobs, all by May 31st this year. For now, Joann's stores are still open. This is because of something called Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It temporarily stops the company from shutting down while they try to fix their money problems. But if no buyer comes forward, that pause will end, and Joann could shut down completely. So, will someone offer more money and save Joann? Joann's story is an example of the fact that success isn't just about growth or profits, it's about trust, vision, and the people behind the brand. Manipulation will never lead you to the peak. But what do you think Joann could have done differently to avoid this fall? What move could Daryl make, apart from selling the company to private equity firm? And even if everything was fine, in today's digital age, can traditional retailers survive without reinventing themselves? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm excited to hear your take. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more deep dives like this. Thanks for watching.